Hey everyone, Rua here with a job guide that's likely been one of my most anticipated yet. Monk's a job that divides opinion, to put it lightly, but how much do people beyond those who play it actually know about it? It's a job that's been around since the game began, and that it's seen its fair share of vogue throughout the game's life. But where does it sit now after all this time? In this guide I'm aiming to give players a rundown of how the job works, and above all, illustrate what I think it has to offer. So, let's get into it. A monk's role is very simple. It's a heavy DPS class which specialises in hand-to-hand combat. Being the game's premier martial artist, the monk has access to the highest tier weapon skills in the hand-to-hand category. Although its forte is in melee combat, a monk is also very durable, having great native skill in both guarding and evasion. Rounding out its skill set, a monk is also a dab hand when using a staff, a weapon category usually written off by players, but in reality it does actually have its uses. While a monk lacks any native magic skills, it has more than a few abilities to give it some very welcome utility. Let's start by going over what the monk has going for it. A monk's most distinct advantage is that its melee attacks are exceptionally powerful, even by heavy DPS standards. A monk can rack up some great damage over time from melee being engaged on its target. It and its party don't pay much for its numerous melee attacks either, as a monk can easily reach the subtle blow cap, drastically reducing the rate monsters use their own TP attacks. Even better, a monk's entry-level gear easily enables it to break the subtle blow cap, practically suppressing the TP it gives to its target. Complementing this further is the fact that a monk is really durable. I'd even say it's only second to the ninja, which if you recall from its own guide, I emphasised was really remarkable. This is down to a monk having a very high native HP pool, as well as a gear selection which lends itself to mitigating damage. Above all though, another one of Monk's distinct traits is that it has a very high counterattack rate, a trait which cancels and also returns incoming damage upon its attacker. For these reasons I've found that a monk functions very well as an off-tank, or rather as a job that can easily cover for a tank if said tank hits the floor. If it had a few more enmity tools, it would actually be a really solid tank in its own right. Monk also has a good amount of self-sustain with chakra, which gives it a huge self-target heal and also removes a handful of ailments which would normally affect its attack rate. It has the only ability in the game which gives a max HP buff to its entire party in Mantra, something which has proven invaluable for me on high-end battles, where having more HP could be the difference in whether an NM's attack wipes the front line or not. I've seen Mantra save many groups. Monks can also utterly cripple the TP gain of their opponent with penance, a very strong effect when played to its fullest. Monk also has a very neat trick up its sleeve with Formless Strikes, an ability which allows it to completely ignore physical resistances some NMs have. If an NM uses Invincible a lot, or likes stacking defense bonus buffs, that won't save it from a monk. Finally, since it utilises blunt type weapons, a monk is absolutely devastating against targets weak to blunt damage. It will utterly tear through anything with a weakness to hand-to-hand weapons. Still, there's more than a few problems. While the fundamentals of Monk are easy to grasp, being one of the starter jobs and all, it's very difficult to master. There's a lot to know, and the fast pace of the job will cause players, new and veterans alike, to stumble more than once. Monk also needs a lot of gear sets as soon as it hits level cap. You're looking at a minimum of 3 TP sets, 3 weapon skill sets, and a whole lot of JSE pieces. And that's just a starting point as well. What some see as Monk's biggest detractor is that its weapon skills don't lend themselves to spike damage. They do decent enough damage, excellent even if you're properly geared and buffed, but a monk just isn't going to match the raw weapon skill damage of a warrior or dark knight. Monks are also very vulnerable to enfeebling effects which affect their attack rate, slow and paralysis. Paralysis is particularly unpleasant for a monk given how many abilities they need to use on the fly, and if one of them gets eaten by the ailment, it can mean a substantial DPS loss. On a more technical level, while a monk has a stellar counter rate, counter means nothing if you're not on top of your target's hate list. Spells and TP attacks also cannot be countered, but honestly it would be a very broken trait if they could be. While Mantra is a great ability, it's really let down by its lengthy reuse timer. A single monk cannot keep up Mantra full time, and alliances used to have 2 monks in a party back in the Delve days for this exact reason. On a similar note, Impetus and Counterstance especially feel as though they're long overdue updates, but more on those later. Hand-to-hand is great at forming light skill chains, but it's a really bad option for darkness, with the only darkness closer available being a relatively weak weapon skill compared to the options other jobs have. As I touched on earlier, Monk has something of an image problem. This isn't as much down to the mechanics of the job itself, but rather down to its strengths really not fitting the current endgame meta. Monk isn't a spike damage job, and it never has been either, but the power creep other melee jobs have gotten in weapon skill power has become really prominent, to the extent that's pretty much all you see in today's strategy making. Finally, Monk sometimes feels like it's a bit of a selfish job, in the sense that in order to make it really stand out, a group needs to cater to its specific strengths, namely in capping out the subtle blow trait. This can be easily done with Auspice and a few gear changes, but you'll be hard pressed to find groups aware of how viable this approach can be. Merits on Monk are pretty straightforward. You want to cap out counter and kick attack rate for Group 1. Reducing Chakra's cooldown would have been an option if the ability itself had a shorter cooldown, but as it stands, go with what I said. In Group 2 you've got slightly more leeway. Capping out Mantra is essential, it's one of your best abilities. The question is, what do you use the remaining 5 merits on? I personally recommend capping out Penance until you need Formless Strikes for a specific event. Formless Strikes is useful, but it's situational, whereas Penance works on everything. That's my reasoning anyway. As with my Puppetmaster and Dragoon guides, I need to go over some job-specific mechanics before I get into Monk's abilities, or they might not make any sense. Guarding's a skill exclusive to hand-to-hand weapons, but Monk is the most adept at using it. Guarding acts like a Monk's answer to parrying in that it negates incoming physical damage. It differs from parrying in that it significantly reduces the damage of an incoming physical attack rather than merely evade it, and that it also works on physical TP attacks. The damage reduction is applied regardless of the target's level to your own, since guard affects the PDIF calculation when determining damage taken. Counter's another trait Monk is notable for. Counter gives you a chance of outright cancelling an incoming attack and retaliating with one of your own. Like Guard, Counter ignores PDIF and acts somewhat like a Rune Fencer's Inquartata trait. Counter's base rate with cap merits and job points is 27%, but this can be pushed well beyond this. Counter is a Monk's last line of defense, as in order for a counter to proc, an attack must pass any shadows, evasion, and your guarding skill before it can activate. Counter also must pass an accuracy check against your target like any ordinary melee attack. I'll go into how you properly give a counter later. Kick attacks are very similar to a ninja's Darken trait, in that it's a trait that gives a Monk a chance of adding an extra attack to an attack round. The base damage of kick attacks is determined by your unarmed hand-to-hand damage, so they don't use your own weapon damage as a base. Kick attacks have a 19% base chance of activating, with cap merits, but fortunately some of your best regular TP pieces you should be using increase the proc rate significantly anyway. Kick attack damage can only be directly increased through certain JSE pieces which have the kick attack's damage value on them, and also through the footwork ability I'll get into soon, as there's a lot more to cover here. 100 Fists is a Monk's first SP, and it can be used to great effect. 100 Fists reduce your delay between melee attacks by 75% after the calculations for weapon delay and martial arts traits have taken place. It's therefore actually possible to break the 80% attack speed cap whenever 100 Fists is active. There's a reason this SP wipes so many careless melees in Dynamis. There's really two ways you can use 100 Fists. Since it doesn't reduce your TP gain when it lowers your delay, it can be used to easily self-Skillchain during its duration, even without Samurai roll. But using weapon skills will soft reset your attack flow. You can also pile on critical hit rate, critical hit damage and multi-attack gear and absolutely lay into your target and watch as its HP just melts away. Take your pick. Unfortunately, kick attacks are disabled during 100 Fists, though that would really be something if they weren't. Focus is a great ability with an annoyingly short duration. Focus gives the Monk a plus 100 accuracy bonus and a 20% critical hit rate bonus for its 30-second duration. Focus is great against NMs with high evasion, like NMs which are ninjas or thieves, and it's also great for maximising damage output from Victory Smite and Ascetic's Fury. You've got a short window with Focus, but it's a strong ability, especially when stacked with Impetus. I would default to using Victory Smite and Ascetic's Fury during Focus's duration, especially if you're using Impetus along with it. Victory Smite and Ascetic spike their damage very nicely if they score a critical hit, and they even skill chain together for a short, but very strong 3-step light. Footwork is probably one of your best abilities for outputting damage. Footwork drastically improves the damage of your kick attacks by combining the base damage of your weapon with your base unarmed damage, so you're going to be seeing some pretty powerful kick attacks going off. Footwork also increases the proc rate of kick attacks by 20%, and even throws in a 25% attack bonus into the bargain if the Shikuyu Tsunate are used during the activation. Footwork's greatest trick though is that it greatly increases the damage of Tornado and Dragon Kick, which will use the new combined damage rating as well as any JSE pieces with kick attacks damage on them as their new base damage modifier. You'll see some insane numbers from Tornado Kick, especially when Footwork's up. You need to prioritize Tornado and Dragon Kick whenever Footwork is up. Use Dragon Kick to close fusion skill chains and use Tornado Kick in a Zerg. Impetus is a decent but ultimately flawed ability. Impetus will increase a monk's critical hit rate and attack with each successive hit they land. Sounds great, but the cumulative bonus resets to 0 the instant any attack misses. As I just mentioned with Focus, Impetus works best when stacked with Focus, and then Berserk Aggressor when Focus falls. If you manage to rack up a good hit chain, then Impetus will pretty much ensure Smite and Ascetics are going to critical hit, dealing some pretty decent damage. Much like you use Dragon and Tornado Kick during Footwork, you need to be using Smite and Ascetics as much as you can during Impetus. The saving grace of Impetus is that it has a relatively longer duration proportional to its cooldown, and that it's a solid increase to your damage over time as well. If Impetus were ever patched to either remove or reduce the penalty for missing, then it would be an exceptionally powerful ability. As it stands though, Impetus is useful, but it still feels a little bit incomplete. Boost is a funny ability which can be effective if you're coordinating with your group. Boost has a dual function. The first is that it powers up the next weapon skill used proportional to the time waited after using the ability. When Boost is activated, it will cause a monk to stop auto-attacking until a weapon skill is used or if the timer expires. This will hurt your damage over time, but it still could be worth the exchange. Boost can still net some pretty decent numbers, especially if the weapon skill used closes a skill chain, so using it in a planned skill chain with your party is pretty much the way to go. Boost's second function is that it causes the monk to deliver one huge punch if no weapon skill is used. The damage dealt and the TP gained from the hit depends on whether it critical hits and whether it scores a multi-attack, so you could see some freakishly high numbers from it. Make sure you watch Boost's icon and keep an eye on its countdown. Dodge is the first of Monk's defensive abilities. Dodge gives the monk a substantial evasion bonus and also increases its guarding rate by 20% for its short duration, the same duration as Focus sadly. Monk already has a decent skill in evasion and guarding, so the effect from Dodge is noticeable. Dodge is best used if something suddenly turns on you and you're caught by surprise, but since it has a short duration, it's best to not rely on it too much. Chakra is next in Monk's line of defensive abilities. Chakra gives the monk a massive self-target heal when it's used, a heal modified by the vitality stat as well as certain JSE pieces. The heal from Chakra is pretty much a guaranteed full heal, and even throws in a few ailment removals as well. Chakra will remove blind and poison without any JSE, but with JSE it removes paralysis, plague and disease as well. I mentioned earlier that paralysis is one of Monk's biggest weaknesses, so Chakra being able to remove it really helps, unless Chakra itself gets eaten by paralysis. Chakra has a lengthy reuse timer of 3 minutes, so it should be safe at times when your group's healer is caught in the headlights and can't get to you in time. Give it a few seconds and if you're still in danger, hit Chakra. Counterstance is potentially one of Monk's greatest defensive abilities, but it comes with some very big risks. Counterstance skyrockets a Monk's counter rate by a colossal 66% when used with the Relic feat, but it tanks the Monk's defense by 50% as a penalty. 50%, that's the steepest defense penalty of any ability in the game. Counterstance is the definition of high risk, high reward, and you really need to know when to use it, and you will also need a proper set built for it. My own Counterstance set is my base TP set you'll see later on with some PDT and DT pieces thrown in to try and mitigate the penalty, which one can get away with since Counterstance will cap your counter trait, leaving you free to use a more conventional set. If you're using Counterstance, you need to remember the fundamentals of counter, especially that you cannot counter a TP attack. So if you have a lot of melees on a monster feeding a lot of TP, and the monster you're fighting has multi-hit physical attacks, it could end very badly for you. G-Blast by itself is not worth talking about, but the merit trait attached to it certainly is. Penance inflicts a very strong inhibit TP effect on your target, which cuts all the TP it gains by 35%. Stacked with the insane amount of subtle blow Monk gets, as well as any potential subtle blow other melees in its group have, and the effect of Penance can make high-end fights ridiculously easy. Penance will never fail to land on its target, and it lasts just beyond a minute and a half, which is roughly half of Chi Blast's cooldown. Penance's only problem is that it can be removed by its target if the target has a means of using Erase on itself, but since that's only a handful of NMs in endgame, you're going to get some very good mileage out of it. While we're on the subject, we might as well go over the Subtle Blow trait. If you recall from my previous editorial on Monk, Subtle Blow reduces the TP a player's attacks give to their target. The trait has a cap of 50%, which can be easily reached with Auspice and some gear swaps, or capped instantly with a high roll on Monk's roll from a Corsair. Monk has 3 pieces of gear which put it at the absolute cap of 75%. This, with Penance's 35% inhibit TP, might lead you to believe that a Monk can feed 0 TP, but even it can't do that. A Monk will still feed TP, but it will be substantially reduced. I literally get Crom to 50% HP before he even has enough TP to use an attack. That's how powerful the effect is. Formless Strikes is one of a Monk's 2 merit abilities, and it's certainly got its uses. Formless Strikes causes all of a Monk's melee attacks to become spirit damage, just like Requiescat. The Monk's attacks will be hit with a 40% damage penalty, which can be reduced to 20% with cap merits. Formless Strikes is best used on monsters which either stack defensive buffs, have a high amount of native physical resistance, or worse yet, combine them both. It can also be used to completely ignore Invincible, all physical shields, and it will even bypass physical absorption mechanics like you see on NMs like Kin. Formless Strikes has no effect on weapon skills, which will still be treated as physical damage, but chances are you might want that depending on the fight. I still wouldn't merit Formless Strikes unless you know you're going to need it, but when you do need it, you'll be very glad it's there. Mantra is the second of a Monk's merit abilities, and it's one of the best, if not the best ability the Chop gets. With cap merits and the relic feat, Mantra will increase the HP of everyone it hits by 30% for 3 minutes. Let's quickly crunch the math here. Considering that the average melee that is not a Monk has between 2000 and 2300 HP in a base TP set, Mantra will be giving them a 600 to 700 HP boost for the duration. That is not a small number. Mantra's benefits can especially be seen in fights where everyone has to be in range. In events like Dynamis where Mijin Gaku and Astral Flow tend to one-shot half the alliance. Mantra is also a nice booster for spells and abilities modified by HP, such as a Blue Mage's White Wind and a Rune Fencer's One for All. Its only problem is that it has a 10-minute reuse timer, so you're either going to need 2 monks or have a Corsair reset Mantra mid-fight. Apart from that, Mantra is a fantastic ability you should keep ready for big fights. Inner Strength is a Monk's final ability, and its second SP. Inner Strength doubles the max HP of the Monk for its duration, and also gives it a 100% counter rate, breaking the 80% counter cap in the process. Inner Strength is pretty much the ultimate oh shit button a Monk hits whenever there's an attack incoming they're simply not surviving without a ton of HP. It's also a very strong counter to Mighty Strikes, Azure Law, Blood Weapon, and 100 Fists from another Monk. To start off the tips section, I best go over some weapon choices. When you first hit level cap, your best starting weapons are going to be the Denouements. These have excellent stats for an entry level weapon, let alone a weapon you can easily get from a higher tier battlefield. They've got high base damage, good delay, accuracy, and even some quadruple attack thrown in as well. The Colossal Blow effect means the Denouements will occasionally deliver a P-diff capped attack in place of one of your own regular attacks, dealing massive damage to anything that is not an NM or an Apex mob. Sorry, but it's not perfect. You'll want to pick the Denouements up as soon as you hit level cap. Believe me, you're going to have an absolute blast with them. Your next weapon are the Comeuppances. Dropped from the Tolmuk Curator, these are hard to get, but they are easily your best non-REMA option. Boasting a likewise solid base damage, shorter delay but more accuracy and strength, the Comeuppances should serve you well until you get an REMA option. Keep an eye out for a Unity Dal campaign, as this might be your best chance of getting them. The Jolt Counter are a very good weapon which serve as your best defensive option until you get the Svarai or the Sagita. These have a very high base damage, a small helping of strength and vitality as long as the same accuracy value as the Denouements. Their biggest selling point though is that they boost your counter rate by 15% and also increase the power of your counter attacks the higher your target's attack stat is compared to your own. The jolt counter can actually be used to make a counter build that very nearly hits the cap. I'll show you the set soon. Finally, we have the God Hands. These are a monk's Aeonic weapon, and they're powerful. Possessing the highest base damage of any hand-to-hand weapon, a healthy helping of store TP and TP bonus, these go a long way in alleviating some of Monk's weapon skill woes. Raging Fists, Tornado Kick and Dragon Kick all scale their damage very well with higher TP, so the God Hands see a lot of practical use. To make things even better, the God Hands also enhance a monk's innate skill chain bonus trait while its aftermath is active. These are pretty much the best damage dealing weapons a monk has. I need to get my hands on the other options, but if anyone else watching has other REMAs for Monk and wants to comment below, go for it. Monk isn't just limited to hand-to-hand weapons though. Staff does have some niche uses which warrants keeping one around. While hand-to-hand weapon skills cannot directly lower a target's defense, Staff can with Shell Crusher. One of my favourite tactics is to open a battle with Shell Crusher and then swap weapons. Shell Crusher is actually very accurate with a decent accuracy magic accuracy build. Easy enough to build one with the Mumu set from Ambuscade really, and it has the same defense down value as Angon, Armor Break or Tachia Jeha. Shell Crusher also has a very long duration, so it's pretty much going to last the entire fight. Staff is also a good option for clearing hordes of mobs with Cataclysm or Earth Crusher. Powerful magical AoE weapon skills. Your best staff is probably the Reikikon from Koryu and Eshka-Ruan. If you're looking for a staff you can pick up right away, there is the Exalted Staff on the auction house. I mentioned this during the overview, but I think you need to see it in action. Monk is very strong against anything weak to blunt damage, undead especially. A monk will tear through undead with astounding speed, reducing the threat they pose by reducing their TP gain, but really by just defeating them a lot quicker. Something I'm very fond of is using a boosted weapon skill around 25% HP to try end the battle before TP mechanics change. This is because monsters will use a TP attack as soon as they reach 1000% when they drop below 25% HP, but they can't use that attack if they're already down. You're going to need at least 3 TP sets on Monk. Your first is your conventional TP build, which contains your usual fare of accuracy, attack, store TP and multi-attack. You do need to pay some mind to Subtle Blow though, as a monk with no job points still needs 25% Subtle Blow in gear or buffs to reach the 50% cap, while a mastered monk only needs 15%. 25% is very easy to reach through conventional TP equipment with a Kendetsuba set. My own set only needs the Adamar bonnet and the Kendetsuba body to reach the cap. A monk should always have the Moonbow belt, the Sherida earring and the Nikmado ring in a TP build to hit the final 75% cap. As with other melee jobs, you should be aiming for around 1150 accuracy before any food or buff. The second set you need is for footwork. While footwork's active, you need to make 2 alterations to your TP set. You'll need to use the +3 relic legs and the +3 artifact feet to bring your kick attack rate up to 98% for the duration of footwork. You could technically use this set even when footwork is not up, but it might not be worth the triple attack loss. Unless you're using the mythic weapon, then this could change entirely. The third set is a counter set, and you absolutely will want one of these. The set you're seeing right now puts me at a 74% counter rate. The key thing with a counter set though is to maintain a solid accuracy stat, because remember, counters need to pass an accuracy check before they activate. I've built a set here which puts me at roughly the same accuracy as my regular TP build, which means the only thing I'm really missing here is store TP and some multi-attack, but Samurai Roll from a Corsair will fix that deficit easily. It's worth using the +3 relic body and feet in this build, as they greatly increase the likelihood of a counter-attack scoring a critical hit, and you'll know a critical hit on a counter when you see it, especially when you're using the jolt counter. This set could be vastly improved with a Sfarai, but it's still a work in progress for me. I'll let you know when I get it. I'm really keen to experiment with a hybrid TP-DT counterstance set using the Sagita. When I get it, I'll be sure to make a follow-up video. I've touched on it a few times so far, but one of the most crucial things to know about doing good damage as a monk is to change your weapon skills, and therefore possibly your skill chain linkers in response to your abilities being up or not. If you've got no abilities up due to paralysis eating them, or if they're just down because you've not rotated them properly, you still have options. Shijin Spiral is pretty mediocre for damage, but it is a good skill chain opener, and it also inflicts Plague on your target, further slowing their TP gain. Raging Fist is one of Monk's best weapon skills for raw damage, but it's really let down by poor skill chain properties not linking it into a level 3. If there's no planned skill chain and you find yourself zerging in a group, then it might be your best shot. Azuran Fist is poor for damage, but it has a valuable skill chain property in liquefaction, important when forming a multi-step light. When footwork's up, you need to replace Raging Fist with Tornado Kick, and Victory Smite with Dragon Kick. Tornado has the impaction property just like Raging, so it won't change the course of the skill chain, but it will probably improve its damage. Dragon has the fragmentation property, so it will outdo Smite as a light closer if footwork is up. When Impetus is up, you need to flip the script again. Your best skill chain with Impetus up is any that involves Smite or Ascetics. If solo, you can do a simple 3-step going from Smite to Ascetics and then back to Smite for a double light. If you're in a group, keep an eye out for fusion or fragmentation weapon skills or skill chains going off, then link to them. Smite and Ascetics can spike pretty high if they score a critical hit, which is likely under Impetus, especially if you stack it with Focus. Building proper sets for these weapon skills is important. The recent fix to WSD affected all melee jobs, but Monk didn't get hit too hard out of it. It just meant that certain sets needed a little tweaking. Smite and Ascetics share the same set, and both need a combination of strength, critical hit rate, and most importantly critical hit damage. Impetus and Focus will go a long way in ensuring critical hits happen, so gearing for critical hit damage pretty much acts as a WSD bonus for both of these weapon skills. FTP does not transfer on Smite. It would probably cross the border into overpowered if it did. Pretty much all of your weapon skills are going to use the Moonbow belt and the Monk's Nodawa. The higher tier the better, as that physical damage limit attribute is going to really help your damage. Raging Fists needs a set which resembles a Rune Fencer's resolution set. You want strength, accuracy, attack, and multi-attack, as well as the Moonshade Earring for the TP bonus, as Raging Fist scales damage with TP. On that note, remember to try and use Raging Fist whenever you're over 2000% TP to really make it sting. Tornado and Dragon Kick also share the same set. Both need strength, accuracy, attack, multi-attack, TP bonus, but also kick attacks damage and weapon skill damage. That sounds like a lot to gear for, but if you go by my example here, the set is actually pretty easy to make. Fighters roll from a Corsair, and Ifrit's Favour from a Summoner can result in Tornado spiking damage when it gets a multi-hit proc. And like Raging, it's best used above 2000% TP. Ideally 3000%, as its FTP roughly triples between 1000 and 3000. This set also works for Howling Fist, you just take off the kick attacks damage and add some more strength. This brings me to the end of this guide. Before I sign off, I'd like to address the adage that Monk is the weakest melee job out there. It's certainly not, it just doesn't fit the current endgame meta like I mentioned at the start of this guide. Monk's biggest problem is that it needs its group to play to its strengths for it itself to really excel, which is something people can't really expect from pickup groups without another meta shift happening. I doubt this guide alone will do that, but hopefully it encourages people to pick up what I found to be one of the more engaging melee jobs to use. If an NM is being mass-fed TP because the Monk is the only one at the subtle blow cap, then the group really isn't optimizing it. Leaders of pickup groups generally don't trust the melee players they invite to have a sound understanding of game mechanics beyond what's only basic. It sounds horrible to hear, but unfortunately it's true. This was partially the reasoning behind my editorial videos, and especially the reasoning behind my job guides. I want to try and show people the depth of this game's mechanics, and how applying them can make tackling content easier, and above all, more engaging than simply zerg rushing everything. In conclusion, Monk's a good melee job which just doesn't adhere to the current endgame meta. It has a lot to offer in today's game, but it's going to take some understanding and for groups to accommodate it if and when they do. I'll sign off here. I'll see you all next time. Right. I'll leave a poll in the community tab of my channel. There people can vote on the next job guide. See ya.